welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard. And at the other end of the series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
Now with Bluetooth.
Oh, you become one of those guys.
I thought maybe our podcast had Bluetooth.
Oh, it's always been available through Bluetooth.
But
Don't be one of those guys with the Bluetooth headset who walks around thinking they're important. The only thing Bluetooth is good for is connecting your phone to your car and speakers to other things, so you can carry around a speaker outside and listen to your music.
Nope, everything's better with Bluetooth. What do we know? We don't even have a Wikipedia page.
I know, and it tasks me. It tasks me.
Oh, well. But that's not what we're here today to talk about.
What are we here to talk about?
Talk about the draft.
By the way, comics are back.
Yeah, whatever.
Oh, come on, man. Come on, man.
Come on. I'll be your friend. Yeah, we'll talk about that next week, because as this podcast drops, we are waiting with bated breath to see if we can actually get into our friendly neighborhood comic store and get some of our belated comics. Are we actually going to get some good stuff shipped this week? Or are we just going to get, we're going to ship this and that because nobody else really cares?
See, I looked at what's coming from DCB Service for me, and I'm getting 4 DC omnibuses.
Yeah, you'll know which delivery truck is going for Cory. It's the one tilted on the side. I was just looking at my bookcase.
My postman will probably hate me.
See, I'm looking at my bookcase that I have my my omnibuses on, and Chris looked at it and goes, I think it's leaning. No, it isn't. And then later I pushed it and go, yeah, it is leaning a little bit to the right. I thought, I've got 1, 2, 3 rows of omnibuses and then paperbacks. So maybe I'm going to have to get the titanium one instead of the old wooden chip one.
Going to have to balance those out.
They are balanced out.
No.
On my big shelf, the one that's wider, it's sitting okay. It's just this little narrow one. It wants to lean to the right.
Well, that's a darn shame.
It is. As long as it doesn't fall over.
Now, Joe, you asked last week about something, and I thought we could start our episode here with last month. The last month there were new comics' top 10. And it's a weird top 10, remember, because it was only a partial month.
Sure.
So here we go. Number one, the number one selling comic in March was Spider-Woman number 1. 142,000 copies. That really surprised me because the last Spider-Woman comic just kind of bottomed out fast and was gone.
Well, when you started out where she's pregnant, it's like,
I thought it was a cool idea for a story hook, but we
already have a spider baby. We don't need any more spider babies in the world.
Yes, we need all the spider babies.
Tip of the hat to Mr. Greep out there.
We need all the spider babies, including Mayday. Mayday
we
Parker.
Had spider babies once. We opened up our back door, and there was a bunch of spiders, making little webs and coming down. And it was like right when we bought our house, and that's supposed to be good luck. And it was actually kind of interesting. And they all went away.
Good luck.
I don't know.
Number 2 is Flash 750.
Oh, yeah, the exhibitionist.
Number 3 was Thor number 4. Which actually, that one surprises me as well because it's a number 4 issue and it's still holding up pretty well. Actually,
the guy
better than when it was under James Aaron.
Is that the guy who pulled his muscle and got really Thor?
Number 4 is X-Men number 8.
That's the feminist thing, X-Men.
Followed by Wolverine number 2.
No, I don't mess with Wolverine. Sorry.
Now that's at 74,000. So just think of the drop from 142,000 for number 1. We're at number 5 and it's 74,000.
But their comics are having a renaissance.
Number 6 is Strange Academy number 1.
Yep, nothing like
really like
number 1 before the book actually hits.
I like that one a lot. Number 7 is Batman number 90.
Was 89 the first Joker girlfriend that everybody was going ballistic about before it actually shipped?
Yes. Let's see. Number 8 is X-Men number 9. Number 9 is Immortal Hulk number 33. Still selling well, and a $6 book. So Marvel's got to be pretty happy about that money coming in. And then number 10 is Batman number 91. Selling at, 66,000 copies around.
I wonder how many people have dropped the habit.
We're going to find out. We probably won't find out immediately. I imagine we'll probably get a good idea of where sales are going to fall in August.
Because we're in a state now that's, what do they call it? It's a different. It's not a stay at home, but it's kind of like you can open your business if you take these certain precautions.
Yeah.
Like I think Dreamhaven, which I believed opened today. I don't recall.
Yes.
Open noon to 6, 10 people in the store at a time.
Everybody wears masks.
Well,
and
the order is that employees have to wear masks. Customers are suggested to wear masks, although an individual business can ask you to wear a mask.
Yes.
And before all you guys who are, whining, oh, they're going to wear my rights. It's the same thing. No shirt, no shoes. No, it's no mask, no service. What I find people forget, and when you own a business and you own the property or you're renting it, it's private property. And that's why two things. If you walk in their store and you trip and fall and break your arm, you can sue them. But the other thing is if they tell you to leave, you have to leave. Otherwise, you're trespassing. That's why if the cops show up and find out they were yelling at me because I couldn't wear a mask, they told me to leave, the cops would be, you have to leave. If you don't, we'll arrest you for trespassing. That's just the bottom line. Even if I'm renting the property, it's still considered private property. And I am in charge of what happens on it. So it's the same thing if I put a sign in the windows, I don't allow guns here. Yep. Or Cory comes in, hey, check out this muscle I just worked out. Check out the guns. Oh. So just remember that.
Whenever I did that, Joe made me leave, not because he had a thing against guns, but I was being really annoying.
He was. Whether you're pro or anti-mask, just remember that. When you go visit, you're on private property, just like going to your friend's house. You either do what they tell you to do or you leave.
And I want to point one thing out, because there's all this about my rights, my rights, my rights. You don't know what the people in the bookstore or the grocery store or the gas station or whatever are dealing with. I'm going to give a perfect example, Joe, and I actually told you more about it than I will say here, but yeah, I work at a group home. One staff came in who, outside of work, didn't care about the restrictions. She lives in a real small town, so the bar there became a speakeasy during the lockdown. Well, she came to work. She wore the mask, but didn't wear gloves, didn't change clothes. Worked in 2 of the houses. In both houses, everybody got infected. All 8 clients, 4 clients a house, got infected. The people I work with have compromised immune systems. They take tons of medication. They've got, especially as developmentally disabled adults get older, they're not healthy. Some of them, we had one client who twice a day, you had to put her on a big, basically we'd call it a ventilator, but it wasn't. It's where you slap a mask on and you have to breathe in your asthma medicine. She had to do that twice a day on a good day. So when you go into the bookstore, I know of at least one person who works at Dreamhaven who has a very compromised immune system. And if you go in there and throw a fit about a mask, why do you want to get that person sick? Why do you want to, even if you don't feel sick, you could be shedding virus. Just be kind to people. The mask has nothing to do with control. It's about being kind to other people. It's about you not infecting everybody. So, Joe and I are planning on going out around this weekend. I have my mask. Joe, do you have yours?
Oh, yeah. I keep it with me. I even keep it at work. And if
I will have a couple masks with me in case some of the people we go with don't have one.
And it's still not a guarantee I won't get it. It just,
right. So let's get off the damn coronavirus and go over to the top 10.
Corona beer. Oh, graphic novels. Yeah. Sorry.
These kind of surprised me. Number 1 was Once and Future, which is a trade paperback from Boom. And it sold around 4,000 copies. I didn't know anything about that one, so I will have to look that up. Number 2
I thought I talked about that one.
You might have.
Hey, see, you never listen to me.
I listen, but I don't retain. I don't retain anything anymore. Unless it has to do with Jack Kirby, it's not.
Which is fun because then every time we do a podcast, it's like new stuff. We'll talk about this. Did we talk about it last week? Well, it's new to me now.
Number 2 is Something is Killing the Children, trade paperback volume 1.
Now that I remember talking about.
Yes, I've read that one.
Yeah, that was good.
Number 3, Immortal Hulk, trade paperback number 6. So Immortal Hulk, kind of a big hit for Marvel there. Number 4, DC Superhero Girls Powerless trade paperback. That's one of those young adult books that's actually selling well in comic shops. Number 5 is a book that I just absolutely loved. History of the Marvel Universe Treasury Edition. Sold around 2,800 copies. Number 6 is The New Mutants. Number 7 is King Thor, which wrapped up the Jason Aaron Thor storyline. Number 8 is Oracle Code, which is another DC book. Number 9 is Star Wars number 13, Rogues and Rebels. And number 10, a book that probably sold a hell of a lot better outside of comic shops, Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons, Volume 2. I did read that a couple of weeks ago. It's really fun. It's really, really fun. If you're a Dungeons and Dragons person, you got to pick it up because it's full of inside jokes and just a blast to read. So there's your top 10. That's in comic shops, not all over the place.
Your mileage may vary.
Yes. So the comic shops are reopening. I have a lot of fond memories of comic shops, Joe. How about you?
I liked them so much, I own 2.
2 of them?
I know.
I feel like doing a Fave 5 episode.
Again?
I love Fave 5
because we haven't done one in ages.
I love Fave 5s. How about the Fave 5 pieces of art that Vince Coletta destroyed?
Okay, now it's the next topic. Why don't we stick with comic shops?
Fine.
Let's do.
Joe, just sit me down.
Our top 10.
Realize I had all this art pulled up on my screen right here, ready to go. But no.
Nope.
No. Go ahead.
Yep. Our top 5 comic shop moments. Things or shops we visited that we thought were way cool in our memory. And I had to stop and think on this because as I expounded last week on the eBays, I have almost 5 different eras in my comic shop buying. The first one really doesn't pertain to the topic at hand because that was my pre-comic collecting days. Back when, I'd read a comic. I remember reading my cousin's Conan Fantastic Four collection. I remember choosing Superman Family because it had Superdog in it rather than Kiss Super Special off the newsstand. And my folks were probably happy because I think the Superman Family was $1 and this Kiss was what, $2.99, $3.99? I forget what the Super Special was when it first come out.
Probably $1.50.
$1.50. Oh my God! Comics are 25 cents. You're breaking me. I can almost hear my dad now. I remember reading one of my friends in the neighborhood had a bunch of Disney comics and how certain ones seemed to read a lot better than other ones, even though it was Uncle Scrooge in both of them. And then years later, I discovered it was Carl Barks. So the pre-comic collecting era was just, whatever. And then, of course, that magical day when I got as a Kris Kringle, or that's what we call him in the Midwest. I forget what they call him in the rest of you weirdos.
Secret Santa.
That type of thing, where my cousin Jerry gave me a Amazing Spider-Man 178, and that got me going on my collecting years. And that lasted up until about 1984 when I hit my first convention. Then I got the selling bug in me. And so I call those the con years, from 84 to about 1992 when I bought Hot Comics. And then, of course, the shop years all the way through 2006 when I finally closed down Crazy Comics. And ever since then, it's been what I call the eBay years. Yeah, I'll buy something, I'll read it, and if I don't like it, throw it on eBay. So different eras of the ones that I really enjoy. And if you listen to last week's eBay thing, I was really waxing nostalgic for that, the collecting era where I've got my first book and I started buying and enjoying and collecting. I mean, at one time I thought I would have every Marvel comic ever published, not counting the Golden Age. And it was obtainable back then. That was before, Amazing Fantasy is not a $30,000 comic in mint shape. But for me, I think the first number one would have to be the first comic shop I ever went into. And it was the predecessor, maybe one more pre in there, of what is currently Dreamhaven today. Greg Ketter's first shop on Dale Front and Como in St. Paul, Minnesota, called Twin City Comics. And I remember going there because when I got my Spider-Man, I got Spider-Man 178 and 3 Fantastic Four comics. And I was thinking, well, I'm not really into Fantastic Four. I read the whole run that my cousin had, somewhere between 100 and 200. And this is, years before I knew who Jack Kirby was, so I missed all the cool stuff. So I went into Twin City Comics, and Greg had to be in his 20s. That's what he's guessing, because we've talked about this before. Because I must have gotten there within the first months of him opening, and he bought 3 of the Fantastic Fours for me for a pricely sum of 20 cents a piece. I turned around and bought more Spider-Man comics, and away I went. I don't remember. I had to have been going in monthly, if not weekly. I wasn't pre-ordering stuff like I did later with Advance Comics. Greg had a really small shop. It was priced well. There was a bookstore downstairs where I remember buying the first print of Star Wars on mass market paperback, which had a totally different cover than the poster from the actual show. I remember seeing books like Beatles' Yellow Submarine, which, I was a huge Beatle fan. And it had 2 little covers on there. It was a pricely sum of $20. I was like, oh, I can't afford that. I also remember the one time I came in and Greg was like, hey, I just got a bunch of back issues. And I thought, oh, did you get Logan's Run number 8? And he kind of had a real disappointed look on his face, like, oh. Almost like, yeah, this kid's not into back issues. Not yet, anyways. So I go by that corner right even today. and I think there's a Chinese restaurant there. And I just remember that was it. And it was a perfect area because I could walk to it, visit the comic store, and then walk over to my cousin's. Or if I went over and he wasn't there, I'd walk back, visit the comic store again, and walk home. Just perfect area. When Greg moved, he went to downtown Minneapolis. That's another story. He had a store downtown St. Paul or downtown Minneapolis. I'm sorry. He moved in and it became the Complete Enchanter. And that itself is a story of how I walked there from the edge of St. Paul to downtown Minneapolis. Not on purpose though, and I dragged Pat Gruber along with me. But that's not a fond memory. But yeah, that first time in an actual comic store, and this was years before I started going to St. Paul Comic, which was down on Rice Street at the time, because holy cow, he charged an entire 25 cents for back issues. Why? Well, we bag and boarded everything. Yeah, but that's outrageous. Oh, so that's what started me. I mean, I often tease Greg even to this day. You should have just kicked me out. Said, "Go, kid, get a life, save your money, kiss a woman." Well, maybe a girl at your age, but nope. It's his fault as much as anybody's. And I always tell him I think I've been on every version of Greg's stores. When he went to downtown Minneapolis, I found him later in Dinkytown, where it was Dreamhaven. And then I followed him over to Lake Street, and now is current over on 38th Street in Minneapolis, which I think will be one of our hits if we play our cards right on Saturday. But how about you, Cory? What's number one memory for you?
It's not the first comic shop I went to, because there was one I went to, and I've kind of figured out that it had to be around 1978, and I vaguely remember it because it had some 35-cent comics on it, and I could still see the cover of the issue of the Avengers. It's where they were fighting Count Nefaria. But that shop, it was boxes of boxes of boxes of back issues. It was in Peoria, and it was there. And then the next time we went to Peoria, it wasn't. So I don't know if it was just kind of a pop-up store, if they failed immediately, or what. But in 1982, in Galesburg, Illinois, there was a comic shop. It was also, they sold baseball cards and rented videos. And if you remember in 1982, up until 84, 85, renting videos was kind of the Wild West because movie studios didn't want you to do it. And they actually had to went all the way up to the Supreme Court before the movie studios could no longer go after people for renting movies. I doubt you even remember that, Joe.
I do vaguely, because the whole thing is that to buy a video cassette, they were like $80 a piece.
And this was back when comics were not even $1 yet. Comics were still 50 and 75 cents. So imagine how much that would be now. But they sold movies to the collector market only, and these were VHS. It wasn't even the nice Laserdisc stuff that had extra, all the extras on it. So they had videotapes. They even had the little back room with the videotapes that men like.
Yes.
You know the ones.
You know the ones.
But I walked in, they had some back issues. They had tons and tons of the new stuff. And oddly enough, Joe, it was a DC-centric store. They had much more emphasis on DC Comics than Marvel Comics. And I don't think I've ever been to another comic shop that focused more on DC than Marvel. But this was 82, and they focused a lot on DC. They also had fan magazines. I was able to finally see the Comics Journal after all those ads in Marvel Comics. Do you remember the ads where it's like, Jim Shooter is planning on killing off this character? Find out who in the Comics Journal. But they kind of became the family's go-to because mom and dad bought a VCR around this time, and we would have to drive all the way. It was like, I don't know, 30 minutes. You have to drive up there to rent a movie, and you could rent like 3 or 4 movies for the weekend, and it was a certain amount of money. So I would go Friday to get comics, and they would say, oh, and rent these movies, and then I would take them back either Sunday or Monday. So that's kind of where I was able to get my first direct market stuff. It's where I learned, basically, where I learned a lot about DC, because I had just started to buy DC comics. Because if you remember right, I just figured out that when people left Marvel, they went over to DC, because they had on the cover of one of them, a cover of Batman written by Roy Thomas and Gary Conway. I'm like, oh, I thought they just went away from comics. Holy crap. And it was drawn by Gene Colan. It's like, oh, wow, all the cool people are going over to DC. That's where Marv Wolfman was. That's where George Perez was. It was where Len Wein went to. And it was just a really cool, your first time getting smacked in the face by a real comic store is always going to be kind of exciting. Now, I doubt there are many people who started buying comics on newsstands or wherever and then found a comic shop. It was just such a cool thing to, you had to go to the gas station, or you had to go to the grocery store, or you had to hope that they had them at Barnes & Noble, and sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. Oh, here's a shop where I can make sure that I get my comics every month. Joe?
For me, and I think I've talked about this before, it was the discovery of ROM number 1. Again, this harkens back more to an innocent age of comics, because this is what I would count. I think, oh geez, when did ROM number 1 come out? To Atomic Avenue.
I think ROM was 79.
79. So this would have to be. Well, let me just tell the story, and maybe we could maybe figure out the specifics later. What had happened is my mom would go to a ear specialist. She had a lot of problems with the microbones in the middle ear. And so she'd go down to see this specialist in downtown Minneapolis in the IDS Center. At the time, the IDS was the tallest building in Minneapolis. I would go over to Schindler's. And I'm sure my ma, had she known I was going to E-Block, would be morally aghast to the fact that I was walking alone downtown Minneapolis by myself on E-Block. E-Block was the infamous block where you had 2 Schindlers on each end, you had strip clubs, you had a McDonald's, you had an arcade, which I remember trying to go up to, and then some guy at the door, I don't think you want to go up there. Okay. And during the night, there was a lot of prostitutes, a lot of drugs, a lot of crime. Ironic that I'm watching Hill Street Blues, because I imagine that's probably how it was back then. I remember above the Schindlers in question I was going to, they had a large billboard, and at this billboard they were advertising cigarettes, and I can't think of the name. Winston, maybe? I just remember red and white, and the woman that was modeling it just had big boobs, and she was wearing a t-shirt. Oh my God. So you'd have thought Armageddon had started, because people were just aghast that here was this large-breasted woman celebrating cigarettes, and people were throwing eggs at the thing, and just, the outrage. And all I could think of is, wow, if I was that model, I would feel a little hurt, because I'm thinking she's getting paid for this. And, sex does sell. Anyways, when they replaced it with the same idea, a woman wearing a t-shirt, this model had a little bit smaller breasts, and apparently the outrage went away. So take that for what you will. All I knew is I was going into Schindler's. I loved going into Schindler's. And to me, this was the only Schindler's. I had no idea there were other ones in town. And at the time, Greg Ketter's store, I believe, was just a couple blocks away. I don't recall. I probably went to his store as well, and then went to Schindler's. His store was called the Complete Enchanter, and it happened to be on a block where eventually the Jesuits bought it, and they booted him out because they wanted to create this giant block of temple. And eventually it burned down. So apparently God doesn't want a Jesuit temple in the middle of downtown Minneapolis.
He wanted funny books and science fiction magazines.
Yeah. So see, that's proof right there. And so the point was I went to Schindler's, and I knew not to go to the Schindler's on the far end. Cory, tell them why you didn't want to go to that one.
Well, there were two of them.
Yeah.
The one there was one that was their main store, and then the other one at the other end of the block was more the way into the warehouse. So I never actually went to, what is it? They had I don't remember what they called that one, but I never actually went down to that one because you could also get into the warehouse from the main store. So if I ever went to the warehouse, I'd go to the main store and then downstairs where.
No, this was actually a little different.
Oh.
Because you had the one main store, and then on the other end was the other brother who opened up his store.
Oh, by the time I moved here, he'd been bought out.
Okay, because I remember going down there with a bag from Schindler's, thinking, "Oh, there's two Schindler's, I'll go in." And when I got in there, "What are you doing in here?" "I come look at your comics." "Okay, but don't touch any." Well, what Joe's attitude was, "Fuck you, I'm going back to the other Schindler's." I loved the bigger Schindler's store because it was just, in my memory, it was vast. It had tons of back issues. I could browse through. Nobody bothered me. I remember picking up, I think it was an X-Men 30. It was the one where Spider-Man was in it. And, of course, you remember we were talking 178, that Spider-Man from that era was a lot different because he had no Mary Jane. He wasn't with Gwen. He was driving a scooter. I'm like, what? But, I understood the continuity and things like that. And I walked in the one day, like I said, my mom was taking care of stuff. I walked through the Skyway, I got down there, and there was a ROM #1. And I had no idea who it was. It was a Marvel comic. That was the #1. And it also there had never been a house ad. They had house ads for the Micronauts. They had house ads for Shogun Warriors. No idea what it was. So I picked it up. And I've said it in past podcasts, but that was the last time I ever picked up a comic book from Marvel, DC, or anybody else that I had no idea what it was. Now, with previews, back then with Advanced Comics, now, of course, with the internet, we know what's coming months before it gets here. Or if I have a question, what's this Marvels that Kurt Busiek is working on? Oh, there's a whole write-up, a whole interview on it. But to just walk into a store and see something and no idea what it was. All I knew it was Marvel, and I had to pick it up. And that was probably one of the, back in the innocent, the golden age days, where I could still get wonder just by looking. Nowadays, I get it just by looking at self-published books and maybe some independents that I might have missed, or maybe some local stuff, especially when I used to travel around to different comic shops. I'm always looking for like something with a local flavor, which is kind of fun. But I don't get surprised by Marvel, DC, Image, Boom, because my surprise is in the previews catalog. So I think I still have that ROM #1. I have the whole set of ROM. That's one of the set of things, unless they make an omnibus or some reprint of it, I probably will never get rid of because they'll never publish that again. Same thing with Micronauts. I don't have my Shogun Warriors. I didn't think much of it when it came out. Although they did have a finale. Was it Fantastic Four?
Yes.
Yeah. See, back then, Marvel did a great thing where they would, if they stopped a series, it would finish somewhere else. We always talk about a Mega Man finished up in Defenders. Well, in this case, Shogun Warriors wrapped up in an issue of Fantastic Four. So where did Godzilla show up? Oh, he's in Avengers. Never mind. So yeah, again, just fun times for a young kid in the golden age. How about you, Mr. Strode? What do you got for another memory?
When the video store / comic shop closed down, around the corner, somebody opened up another comic shop that was also an arcade. And somehow they got permission to stay open till 2 in the morning. And they also had computers, so you could play computer games. And this is in the 80s. This is like 84, 85. They had computers for playing computer games. They had all these video games, and they sold comic books. And, Joe, I'm about to spill some secrets here.
Ooh! Those of you that don't like secrets can now tune out for a few minutes.
The girl I was dating at the time, who later became the ex-Mrs. Cory, was not allowed to see me.
Because?
Well, I'm not getting into that. She could tell that story if she wants, but her parents did not want her to see me. And we wanted to see each other, so what we would do is after her parents would go to sleep, she would sneak out, and we would go places. We would go to midnight movies, and we would go to this comic shop. I would pick up my stuff. We'd hang out, play computer games and video games till they closed. And I tell you what, when daylight savings time would end, the shop could stay open till 3 in the morning because at 2 o'clock it magically became 1 in the morning. So it was more time for us to hang out and kind of be social and be around other people and actually kind of like actual date. But this is where I got my first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because it was 84. They actually, I think what I remember, I went away to college and I came back and they were gone because I switched to the comic shop near the college I went to. But I still remember coming back and it was gone, and it was an office building. There were desks and chairs and stuff. And I asked one of my friends, they said, "Oh yeah, black and white boom, killed him dead. It was ugly." But that was a cool comic shop. Now, we've got hybrid comic shops that are comic shops and this, comic shops and that. But I thought that was a really, especially in the 80s, that's just a license to print money to my mind. Joe?
For me, number 3 would have to be the first time I entered Hot Comics. Now, I'm not talking about the 3,000 square foot behemoth that I made it into, nor am I talking even the 800 square foot one that I ended up buying with my partner, Pat. No, I'm talking about a little tiny, about 100 square foot hole in the wall that, back then I was buying comics with Pat, and he told me, there's a comic shop that opened up nearby me. Well, where is it? It's right on White Bear Avenue. I remember driving down White Bear Avenue where he said it was, and I didn't even see it. He says, no, it's behind the Instaprint. And sure enough, I walked back there, and I walked in the shop, and there was Brian, knees up on a tiny little desk. He had a little black and white TV, probably watching Star Wars for all I know. And
that's the joke.
Yep, and it not bad from the fact, but didn't have a lot of comics, but the vintage toys, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Big Jim. There was some custom-made figures done by this guy named Dan, who I had no idea who he met. He works here on weekends. Well, I worked weekends, so I never made it down there on the weekends. And Brian was just a friendly guy. It was just fun to go in, looking at all the toys he had. Oh, look, I'm drooling you're talking, that's how you know there's no time traveler, because these guys would go back in time and just, "Hey, Brian, what happened?" "Oh, some guy came in, looked a little like you, bought everything." Pat and I did not go as regular customers to Hot Comics until the guy we were going at, John Nunziata at St. Paul Comic, he decided one day he'd had it up to here dealing with Cap City. And I can understand. These are things, shortages, billings, allocations, not getting your shit on time, stuff like that. He had a Schindler's at downtown St. Paul. So if he didn't get his stuff right away, and Schindler's had it, he lost sales. He just got tired of it. And so he decided to cut back on all customers and not carry any new product. He was just going to concentrate on old paper. He made a killing business doing hockey-related T-shirts because the hockey tournament was right down there in downtown St. Paul, and people would walk right by, see the T-shirts, people would come in. He would tell me stories of like a guy came in and said, "Hey, do you have this Donald Duck comic from?" And he described it. He goes, "I do." The guy dropped $100 on it, took it, folded it in half, stuffed it in his back pocket. And John said, "Well, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, just a comic I remember as a kid. I just want it with me when I'm traveling the road on my truck." And John was like, "I could have sold you a beat-up copy if that's what you wanted to do with it, but whatever." John was quite a character. He ended up closing his shop. And Pat and I at the time, we had made a bit of a name because we were been selling comic books at conventions all these years.
At discount. How dare you?
How dare we? And we went to shows, Kansas City, Duluth, St. Cloud. That's how we got to know Tim from Granite City and Dave. The infamous Wisconsin Dells show, which I think Pat and I talked about on the Solo Joe when I interviewed Pat. So you can go check that out. And when it became, word went out that Pat and I were kind of free agents. People actually came and started talking to us. I know Al came on behalf of Dreamhaven and said, we're looking, would you like to buy your comics from us? We talked to, I think, Comic City at the time, and we went up to Brian and Dan and we looked at the terms they had. And for what Pat and I did, we would have gotten 30% off because you had to order, over 250 comics a month. And between both of us, we were over like 500-600. Not to mention Pat was buying duplicates all the time and things like that. And we ended up going with Hot Comics. And Butch tells the story about, was it the weekend that they were at Kane County, or was it the weekend? No, it wasn't the weekend Brian got married. They told Butch, "Yo, we got these new customers coming in, Pat and Joe. Don't fuck it up." And Butch has told this story, I know, on the podcast before. And, well, he didn't. And we liked the company so much, eventually Pat and I bought it. That's a tale for another time. But just going into that first Hot Comics, 100 square feet, packed with just incredible stuff. Not a lot of comics. Pat and I would still, we'd go from John's to Hot Comics and go visit the Schindlers up in Maplewood. I think everybody stopped at Schindlers eventually, if not for the actual comics. Just if you knew, hey, this is a Hot Comics going to sell out, go to Schindlers, buy their copies. Unless Schindlers caught on and, sold out already. Yeah, sure you did. Why is it $10 on the wall? Anyways, that to me, like I said, that changed. Wasn't quite the shop years because we were still buying stuff for the con and things like that. But then came the magical day when Brian decided to sell the store. But that's a different memory for me. Again, number 3, the first Hot Comics, that little hole in the wall. Who knew? Cory?
The first year I went to the Chicago Comic Con was 1984. And the only reason I went was because I would drive into Canton, Illinois. And one time I'm driving by, and this guy, there was just a sign in the yard that says comic books. Well, I didn't know that. Okay. And I go, and he's got, the main house, but the sign pointed to the garage. And you know how the garage door would normally come down? He had changed it so it was a wall, and there was a door in the garage door. And I knocked on it, and it was a guy. He couldn't have been more 17, 18. And I was like 18, 19. And in his garage, he had set up tables and tons of long boxes. And he was basically selling back issues. Didn't have new stuff, but had tons of back issues. And I got to the point where I would stop every couple of weeks, just pick up some stuff, some 70s comics that I could get pretty cheap. This was back when, 70s back issues were, Bronze Age stuff was, quarter cover price, but you could get it for 50 cents or $1. And that was pretty cool because, you had to mail away for it otherwise. And we kind of became friends, and he said, well, I'm going to the Chicago Comic Con. I went, really? He said, yeah, me and this other guy, and, we drive up and we share a hotel room. And I decided I would throw in. And that was my first trip to the Chicago Comic Con. And the funny thing was, they were there, they were just hunting back issues. They were hunting for treasure. Me, I was just, oh my God. Every creator I've ever known my whole life is here. The sad thing was, it was I think Chicago at that time was a 3-day show, but we were only up there for 1 day. We had to leave the next day. So we actually just went up for the Sunday and came back. But I thought that was such a cool idea that he must have talked his parents into letting him have the garage to open a business in it. And I wasn't the only one who bought stuff. There were times I would drop by and there would be 2 or 3 other people there in his garage. And Canton, Illinois, not a big town, less than 10,000 people. Town I grew up in was 350 people. But obviously, being the only guy selling comic books in the 80s, he must have done okay if he was able to kind of run a little business out of his house. It was one of the odder comic shops. I've always liked odd comic shops. I don't think you're going to find anything like that much anymore. I know that they've got garage conventions and stuff. But pretty much now, if you're opening a comic shop, you're actually going to buy you're going to get a storefront. You're not going to run it out of your basement anymore. Joe?
My brain just is flashbacking to stores like that. I remember going to a garage sale and a guy had tons of comics for sale. And this was before 178. And my mom allowed me to buy 5 because the guy wanted a princely sum of $1 a piece. And later she went back and bought $20 more. My kid really liked those. Could you buy some more? And just, and we're talking, this was early DCs, not so much Marvels, things like that. Just to go back and just say, okay, guess what? I'm going to buy every comic you got here. Funny enough, John Nunziata did that when he first started. He ran all over town and bought all the Golden Age from everybody at full retail, and everybody laughed at him until Golden Age prices exploded. Then they weren't laughing so much because he was the only guy in town that had them. Again, as I go forward into into the shop years, and I just think of the early days of hot comics. Oh, you want me to talk about it? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. And what's going? I think of when I was. I don't even know where to start. I mean, just the feeling when Pat and I bought the shop, and that first day we ran it. It happened to be the week that Superman died, so it was a crazy week. Dan and Brian were around for most of the month because they were setting up Hot Comics Edina. We got to, use their experience until eventually that one day where Brian's like, you know what, not coming in next week. You guys know what you're doing. You just do it yourself. I remember having you guys come in. I don't know if you were with us yet, Cory. I had the MCBA guys come in, and we'd all sit around and talk about what comics to order out of Advance Comics.
Oh, yeah, because Brian Wilson was always...
Yeah.
Not for the shelf.
Don't order them. Not for the shelf. Not for the shelf. Eventually, Pat and I just got...
Yeah, it was fun. You and Pat would just go, 100 copies.
100 copies. Oh, and I found a bunch of invoices. Maybe in a show or two, I'll talk a little bit about them, because you look at some of the numbers that we ordered, it was just crazy. 100 copies here, 100 copies there. Eventually, Pat and I just did it ourselves Tuesday, because we'd walk the order over to what's his name, Mark Carros, because we had a local capital city warehouse, and he would take the orders. And eventually we learned new tricks. Like I had my nice, we bought a program from one of Brian's friends for $800. That was a DOS program that would take care of subscriptions. And the best part about it, and this is something I used through all my shops, including Crazy Comics. When subscription day came, you'd say, okay, give me Everybody Wants Advanced Comic, or wants Amazing Spider-Man. Now, does anybody want a certain issue of Amazing Spider-Man or a crossover, things like that? And we had people like all Superman, because all the Superman books were tied together. I remember, watching television as I'm sitting there in the shop, because the agreement was with Pat, and then of course later I bought Pat out, is I would work Monday through Friday, Pat would work the weekends, and then rinse, lather, repeat. And eventually it just led to Pat being burnt out. And but I just remember just sitting there, and when it's slow, I'd be watching the news, and you had some guy protesting on there going, "Yep, I'm tired of working. I want what's coming to us. I want my fair share. And I was just livid. I was like, dude, I just basically took everything I had ever made in my life, working at Sears for 10 years, bought this shop, took the future of my daughter, at the time unborn, my wife, just to grab my piece of American pie that I worked for, and I took myself. And here's a guy sitting there going, I want what's coming to me. And I'm like, I remember telling Brian, yep, I just took my first step to the right side. Because, I do remember enjoying telling people I was the boss. I would talk to the manager. Hey, I do you one better. I'm the owner. You're not the owner. I said, well, there's nobody else here except me, so you treat me as the owner or you can go. I do remember times when people would get all pissy with me. I want to talk to the manager. Do you one better. I own the place. What? I said, yep, I own every single thing in here except the walls. Yeah, a lot of fun doing that too. And again, I had worked 10 years at Sears, where if they didn't, I want to talk to your manager, and oh fuck, no matter what's happening, I'm going to hear from it, because satisfaction guarantees your money back. The customer's always right. Well, we all see where Sears is now. Come to think of it, we see what happened to Hot Comics after I left. But yeah, telling people I was the boss was just a kick. I remember having dreams, and I don't know if you've ever had this, Cory, where you leave one job and you go to the next one, but you dream you're at your old job.
Oh, yeah.
And then part of me is like, you know what? I don't have to stay here at Sears. I got my comic shop I can go to. I enjoyed selling stuff. I really enjoyed selling lots of stuff. But, it didn't matter when I found out I could pay my rent by selling candy bars versus selling Pogs. Pogs, of all things. We sold Magic. We had Pokemon. The toys. Getting in 20 cases of toys, and 13 are already pre-sold. I love looking at the old pictures of the shop. I wish I'd have taken more. Just looking on the back, you see, oh, look at that. There's what was Iron Fist at first Sabretooth, and then next to it was the crossover with the X-Men. There was Gru #1. Just all these books, which ones have gone up, which ones have gone down. I remember doing the fateful step, going from the 1,000-foot to the 3,000 square foot. And when were you with us, Cory? Could you get off that weekend?
No, I was able to help in bits and pieces, but I wasn't there for the late nights when Brian Wilson had the had the bullets.
Oh yeah. And we put the stuff up. I just remember going from 800 square feet to the 3,000 square foot. And when I lined everything up, I was like, holy cow, I'm out of room already. How the hell did I fit all that shit in that 800 square feet? And now I'm in a store 3 times as big. I didn't even like what you were talking about. When Brian come in to help us we were one of the first places to get grid wall with the slanted shelving. You see it almost everywhere now, where they can lay the comics down and they just sit and they pile till they're up over the lift. The Source has them. Comic College has them, or had them. Now they have their own. But most of the time people would put just that month's issue in, maybe the month before, and then they pull it and turn it into back issues. Pat and I would leave things there until they fell over the lip. And it was also a great way to tell if something was not selling, because suddenly you'd have tons of them. I remember the Tuesdays you'd come up, we'd watch wrestling. I'd go through that entire wall and just count things. I don't know how the hell I did it in the early years. There's a disconnect between, did I track these things so closely in the beginning, or I must have.
No, you didn't really have to, though, because remember, when you first started, I ordered 100 of each Image book except for Spawn, and that I ordered 200, and they'd sell. It wasn't until stuff slowed down.
About mid-90s, I would think.
That you finally said, I better get a handle on this stuff.
Yeah, and I remember because our good buddy Brent Moore from Comic Archives gave me a sheet that Marvel Comics gave him, and that became the base. I mean, I had a huge 3-ring binder that I would go through every week, and I enjoyed it. Go from A to Z, move everything around, and we'd stop if something cool happened on wrestling. I'd take a break and watch it. We'd order the inevitable pizza, and of course, my favorite of the entire thing. And I got to go find into my album, because, again, in my Facebook, you go under albums, and somewhere I have the album of Hot Comics St. Paul. And you see not only parts of the little store, like when it starts out with some of the signings we did, and then some of the big stores. Hey, who's that holding Cory up in his shoulders? Stone Cold's in the background. But the infamous 24-hour sale. I can't even talk. I'm so giddy thinking about it. Do you remember what hours were you there, Cory?
I don't remember. I just remember I was working an overnight at the group home, and I called a couple of times on the overnight. And I said, I wanted to leave you a message about cheese.
Jeez. And I'm looking at the thing now. It's announcing Hot Comics 24-hour sale. Nobody had ever done anything like this. Starts noon August 4th, ends noon August 5th. And let's see. 12 noon to 8 p.m., 30% off everything except new comics and consignment. And that includes things like back issues, posters, toys, magic, cards, pogs. 8 p.m. to midnight, convention time. No reasonable offer refused. Midnight to 2:30 a.m., the mystery sale. And only one person came in and took advantage of it, because basically he read the thing, because it said that from what I was doing is I was pretty much costing things out, and he was smart enough, and I can't remember his name, Joel. He used to partner with Nick Post all the time at cons. It'll come to me later. But he came in, and I said, I'm surprised you didn't come up for the back issues. He goes, well, not really into the back issues, but I did see the way you had it worded, and I kind of figured this would be the time that would be the best sale. And he was right. But we closed from 2:30 to 3:30 or 3, and then we opened with the We Need Sleep sale. 70% all back issues, 50% off all new comics. And I remember at my wife's suggestion that we rent a cop to come in, and he just stayed there. And it might have paid off, because I remember between that mystery sale where a couple guys come in and they looked around and they looked at the cop and they turned around and left. But at 3 a.m., all hell broke loose. This was the first time I believe any comic store in the Twin Cities ever did a 70% off sale on their back issues. Just not done. Now it's almost common. But Again, this is an 800 square foot store. We were packed. People were coming up with 5-6 long boxes worth of comics that they would just pick up. And we didn't slow down till about 7 o'clock. Even though the sale was over with at 5 a.m., we just kept it rolling. And it got to the point where I don't know who it was. Somebody would just write up a tally. That person would get to me, give me the sheet. I'd ring it in, apologize for the wait. People would go. And then, of course, once the sale was done, we just went 50% off back issues plus clearance sales. And we stayed open until 6 on that Saturday. And I believe we grossed over $10,000 in cash.
Jeez.
And that doesn't count the credit cards, checks, and all that other stuff. I remember the cop asking me, he stayed till I counted everything. He asked if he wanted to go with me to the safe deposit or till I got to the bank. And I said, no, I think I'm fine. And I got there and I was able to stuff it in. Yeah, it was a crazy. Even now, I'm just getting tired thinking about it because it was just amazing. We had sales every hour. We had giveaways every hour. We had a grand prize drawing for a limited Marvel hardcover, The Very Best of X-Men. Oh, now the best thing about this sale was the next year people were like, you gonna do another 24-hour sale? I said, no, but I think we're gonna do an all-day sale. Did an all-day Saturday sale. I think it was 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Made the same amount of money. So we never did the 24-hour sale again. But man, that was just a crazy time. And I remember going home and sleeping and waking up at noon and coming back. And, there were still people picking through what was left. And to this day, again, if I could time travel, I'd go back and just look at that sale and see how it went. Because, the look on the cop's face, because he thought for sure nothing was going to happen. And when the people came swarming in, you could just see he was like, what in hell's bells is going And I stood at that cash register, like I said, from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. And it was a blast. We were going nuts. We were crazy. Oh, that was fun. So I have so many good memories of Hot Comics. Early parts of the podcast was all Tales from the Shop. So hopefully this will dredge up other ones. And if you got anything out there you remember, hey, just drop me a note and jog my memory because, that was a good 10 years. I can't remember all of it. Cory?
The next thing on my list is my interview at Schindler's.
Ooh, I don't think we've ever talked about this.
When I moved to Minnesota, I got a job at a video store. And I think it was like the week before Christmas. My boss asked me to stay late at the video store. And she said, well, my son has had to drop out of college, and he needs a job. And if I just give him a regular shop job, it wouldn't pay enough for him, so I need to make him manager. Now, the manager at the other store, he's been with me for 4 years. So, bye. And what it was, my soon-to-be ex-Mrs. Strode had asked me to meet her at the restaurant around the corner. So I go around the corner to meet her at the restaurant, and I must have looked like I'd been hit in the back of the head with a hammer because she was like, are you okay? I said, well, I have some news. She said, I have some news too. You should tell me yours first. I said, well, I just got let go at the video store. She went, oh, I'm expecting.
I think that beats mine, but go ahead.
So I was, yes, I did get unemployment because I was laid off. But still, video store wasn't paying a whole lot of money, and we had just moved here. She was working at a pizza place and, wouldn't be able to work there much longer. So I was desperate to get a job. And I'd landed a job at a group home. And it was Saturday every other weekend. So that certainly was not enough to live on. And that was back when there weren't a lot of hours at that group home. That changed eventually. So I saw an ad in the paper that they were hiring at Schindler's. I gave them a call. They had me come down and interview. And this was at the main store, and this was my first time in downtown Minneapolis. So they go, oh, you're a comic guy, huh? And they asked me, a bunch of questions about, you did here, you did here, you did here. Then they said, okay, well, if you're a comic book guy, what's the best-selling comic? I said, well, do you want the best-selling comic kind of overall series, or what was the best-selling comic last month? Why not both? Well, the Uncanny X-Men's the best-selling comic, but the best-selling comic overall, I think it was the first issue of, I think it was like the first issue of Batman. Was it Batman Year 2? It was some Batman story that had sold through the roof. It was either Batman Year 2 or Batman Year 1. And I said, well, overall it's Uncanny X-Men, but last month it was this book. And, and I went into extreme detail because they used to publish that stuff in the back of Amazing Heroes. They're like, okay, we're going to start you, but first we want to see how you are on a register. This is my interview, Joe. They took me to the front register at the downtown Shinders and had me ring stuff up for an hour. And at the end of the hour, they said, okay, we're going to get you started. We'll give you a call when you're on the schedule. And it was like 6 months later, I asked, why the hell did you do that? And they said, well, if working front register at downtown doesn't scare you off, nothing will. But that's, pretty memorable because I remember going home going, oh, thank God. Because we'd moved up here. I moved away from everyone I knew, from all family, only to have the job pulled out from under me the day I find out I'm going to be a father. So, Joe, what is your number 5 comic shop memory?
I was just gonna not my pregnancy story, but it was like the week Pat and I took over Hot Comics was when Chris announced, I'm expecting.
Oh.
I had thought she was just being crabby all October because, hey, I quit my job at Sears of 10 years to go open a comic store. But nope, she had a reason. And of course,
not a good reason.
My brain went, I can't deal with this now. It's 9 months in the future. My last memory is kind of a cop-out because I genuinely enjoy going to visit comic shops. I enjoy going to new comic stores. I wrote something up on, I think, Dan Wiesemeyer's page. I want to see if I can find it because I was actually, he talked about being able to go visit a comic store finally. And I wrote, I hit a lot of comic shops before they were closed, even bought some stuff mail order and eBay wise, but nothing beats going into an actual comic shop and browsing, buying stuff you didn't know you wanted until you saw it. That's kind of my collecting mentality now. Yeah, I know I need this omnibus or I'm missing that essential or whatever. I know I've got holes in my collection, but I'm never coordinated enough to have the list ready when I need it. Or when I do the list, then of course I conveniently lose it right before, like, we're going geeking this Saturday. But I love going into comic shops. A couple good news things. I talked with my buddy Turbo down in Florida, and he said one of those shops I visited in St. Cloud, Florida, Trouble's little sister, I was worried about because I wasn't sure if they'd be able to survive this no comic stuff. And he said they had just been down there last week, and they're open, they're doing fine, and they bought some stuff. So hopefully as time goes on, we'll discover that everybody's survived okay. Another shop I visited when I was down in Orlando, and this wasn't too long ago. This was it February into March, when I went into Vault 5421, and I asked Cory, what's the one thing a comic shop should have?
Crack and hookers?
Close. You actually said, how about a bar? And I said, that's what this place
Oh,
had.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, in the back. Gods and Monsters. And I believe the Vault 5421 is the shop. Gods and Monsters, or one or the other. But they're all together. 5421 International Drive in Orlando. To find the fact that they had a bar in the back, which was brilliant, because not only did that allow me to browse the shop for an hour. But then Turbo and Chris went into the back, and because Turbo goes there all the time, they just sat in back. What a brilliant way to keep the non-comic person entertained by having a separate. And again, it wasn't a full bar, but they could serve beer, they could serve drinks, they could serve like whatever canned beverages you like. I go into stores now, and I'm instantly drawn to the one unique thing they have that nobody else has. And 9 times out of 10, it's the most expensive thing in the shop that I can't afford anyways. But it's always fun to find something. Like when I was in Gods and Monsters, I found the Simpsons Weird Al Yankovic figure, which I totally blanked on when it came out. Never saw it. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy going through comic shops. I'm looking forward to this Saturday. Knock on wood that I can go. Because even if I go to a place like Dreamhaven or Cedar Cliff or whatever else we're going to go, they're going to have things that I can dig through. I'm going to see things I really want that I can't afford. I might find some things I didn't even know I wanted until I saw it. Case in point, that the thing I bought from Dreamhaven, the Unquiet Dreamer, a tribute to Harlan Ellison. Didn't know I wanted it until I saw it in their catalog. And that's ultimately what I love. I'm looking forward to the new memories. When I listen to old shows, I delight, especially when I've been traveling around. When I was down in Vegas, when I was in Hawaii, when I was in New Jersey, I got to go visit Kevin Smith's Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash. I got to visit every comic shop in New York, including I think St. John's, which isn't there anymore. Again, a smaller shop. They closed before the pandemic. It just, rent was going too high. But, that was a beautiful shop. What's the Big Britain one? Fantasy?
Forbidden Worlds.
Yeah, Forbidden Worlds. Beautiful shop. But this shop was just old school. If I didn't have a time limit, I would have gone back and just really taken time and dug through things. We got shops like that up here now. I see them in thrift stores. I see Mr. Zero's that way. When I really get in the mood and I start digging through like The Source or Nostalgia Zone, places like that, or even, hopefully the upcoming MCBA show, October 10th at the FallCon, at the Education Building. We're still all waxing this weekend because this would have been the weekend that SpringCon would have been going on. People are remembering our good buddy Nick. They're remembering times being there. You kind of miss it because you didn't get to go. I mean, we got reasons for it, but I look forward to that memory. Cory, I really want to get back. What was that place in Superior? Daily Globe?
Oh, yeah.
I really want to get back there and dig through those comics. I mean, they're a hot mess, but just the thought of finding some fun stuff in there that oh, wow. Didn't know this was there. So, yeah, you got a comic shop you like, just let me know where it is. I really want to come and visit it. Cory, what you got that's your favorite comic shop memory, the final one for you?
The final one for me was that one free comic book day where it was you, me, and Butch. And we wandered around all the different shops, and it was kind of rainy and drizzly, and it was more we were just hanging out until we got to the Source. And then at the Source, we go back, we're looking for their deals, and in the back, $1 trade paperbacks.
Oh, Black Friday. It was Black Friday.
Oh, it was Black Friday.
Last Black Friday, yeah. Wow.
And we just loaded up, but the whole day was fun because, we don't get together all that much. Butch was in rare form. You were in rare form. I didn't have to work either job, so I was able to hang out all day and just ending the day with that bargain of holy crap, because they didn't advertise it anywhere. We didn't know it was coming. They just basically, it's almost like they dropped it on us.
Oh, and the stuff we bought.
Oh, cool.
And could you imagine if we'd have gotten there the first day? That would have been the only stop we'd have made that day, because we probably would have left. Oh man, I mean, I can't envision the treasures I found Could you imagine if it had been we got there first?
It would have been frightening.
Uh,
We would have had to go back to your place, empty the truck.
Good thing we had the truck. Yep.
Oh, that's right. We got to make sure to get our plastic bins this time.
Yep.
But nope, that's the one I have. You know what other memory I have, Joe?
What's that?
I have a memory of these guys, our sponsors. Believe it or not, kids, this here podcast has sponsors. And that sponsor, since day one, is DreamHost.com. DreamHost.com is the best, bar none, web host in the whole known universe. And if you need a website, head on over to DreamHost.com, put in code KRAYZ, that's KRAYZ, and get $20 off your first year. Now, if you would like to advertise here on any of the Solitaire Rose Network podcasts, you can. Just email me at solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com, subject advertising. Also, head on over to eBay and look for user Krayz, Krayz. That's Joe Crazy Writer, who's always telling us about the eBay in every episode of Crazy Comics and Stories. If you would like to contact us, you can do so. You can give us a call at 952-856-0519. Leave a message and we'll play it on the show. Or you can send us an email at solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. Thanks.
It's good to remember them.
Almost done an hour and a half without getting even to this far, so we're
I
going to
know.
have to speed things up. But one thing we never speed up is all the other podcasts I do, like these. The Solitaire Rose Podcast Network is filled with all kinds of audio goodness. First, there's Crazy Comics and Stories. It's been going since 2010. It drops every Monday, and it has me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard, and Joe Crazy Writer talking comics, shenanigans, and whatever we're freaking and geeking about. Every Monday morning. It's been going since 2010, and it's available at crazycomics.solitairerose.com. Also on that same feed is the Solitaire Rose Podcast, which is me, again, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard, doing interviews, talking about comics history, pretty much talking about whatever I want to talk about. We've also got Solo Joe, where Joe Crazy Writer does a solo podcast, and he hasn't done one in a while, so kick him in the shins to get him started. We also, on that same feed, have Solitaire Rose Series and Review, where we do DVD commentary of older comic book series. That's all at crazycomics.solitairerose.com. I also do a podcast with Wolfie B. Bad at badadvice.solitairerose.com, where we take listener questions and give them bad advice. There's also Novelcast, where I take the novels I've written and turn them into free audiobooks. That's at novels.solitairerose.com. There's also Fantastic Forecast, where myself and Adam Vermillion are going through the entire run of the Fantastic Four, 4 issues at a time. That's fantasticforecast.solitairerose.com. And if you think that I'm on all of these podcasts, you're wrong, because Scrabbling Across the West is at scrabbling.solitairerose.com, where musician Dave Cofell and his wife Stephanie travel across America and then sitting down to play Scrabble and talk about the day. That's at Scrabbling Across the West, scrabbling.solitairerose.com. There are always more podcasts at the Solitaire Rose Podcast Network. Be there. Aloha. And now we get to the point where Joe thought he was going to have to stretch. He was going to have to come up with more.
I like stretching.
No. Nope, it's just a regular time where I asked Joe what's going on the eBays. Joe?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I ever did finish my series on the eBays. One of the big questions you have when you're selling on eBay is what to sell. And really, that's up to you. I mean, I think of some of the odd things I've sold over the years. I'm not talking my buddy's restored Amazing Fantasy 15 that he bought, not realizing it was restored. I think that was probably the highest price thing I ever sold. It went upwards of $5,000. But I remember selling like one of the FAO Schwartz gold-plated Power Zords. There were only 3 made, and Brian at Hot Comics at the time tried to get all 3 of them, but he wasn't quick enough. He got 2 of them, and I think he probably kept one. He might have sold it. The other one, eventually, Christy had it, and I ended up selling it for her. And that thing went close to $1,000. I've sold some original art for different people, but I've also sold some really weird things. I mean, we found a pair of baby shoes that we never used for Dana. Put them up for $10. Someone bought them for $10. I just sold a Nestle Rock mini album mail away, where you bought like $100,000 bars and sent in so many wrappers, and they sent you this mini rock album. They had like Cheap Trick on it, Journey, REO, Molly Hatchet. Not expensive. I used to love doing mail order stuff like that. Not everything is that way. I did sell a Transformers Power of the Prime, Rodimus Prime figure. That one, I think I bought it to open, and then, sat around, went up in value. I said, I can't do it now. Can't open that. Some other oddball things. Cory, you ever have a printer die on you?
Yes.
What do you do with the extra printer ribbon?
Ribbon?
Could be ribbon, could be cartridge, could be actual ink bottles.
We'll probably sell them on eBay if that's what you're
Right.
talking about.
Exactly, because I don't do a lot of auctions, but with those, if you start them at 99 cents, I put 3 up. I had one for an old HP printer, I had a bunch for an Epson printer, and then another one for another Epson printer, and I just put them all up. And like I said, the HP one didn't sell, but the other one sold for a pretty good penny. Speaking of mailaways, I think I've talked about this before. Surge, if you remember Surge Soda.
Yes.
Yeah, they had a mailaway promo CD that had a bunch of different bands on it, and I had 2 of them for some reason. I must have played them at one time or other because I did end up selling them. I had The Prisoner. No, not the from Cell Block H. No, this is the Patrick McGowan The Prisoner show. I had the original soundtrack LP from '86 that I bought because I used the opening theme as the opening theme to our radio show that my buddy Dave and I did. Eventually, I switched to the opening of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which worked out a little bit better. Ended up selling that. So, yeah, you probably got stuff sitting around. No matter what it is you sell, be it comics or an Illudium Q36 explosive space modulator, take a look on the eBays first and see what they price for. And if you're not sure about that, go back to price. I believe I talked a number of podcasts ago about how to price your stuff. And, because I'm a cheap guy, I'm always looking for the cheapest price and going under. Even if you find somebody, say you put something up there and somebody's got it for $5 and you paid $20, just wait. Eventually his $5 one will sell, and then $20 will be the normal price. So in the meantime, with all the time I've been granted off from my job, even though I'm on call, I've been putting lots of stuff up. And the last batch of things that I'll talk about is I found a bunch of Ditko stuff that he'd been doing. Mr. A, Ditko Continued, Act 3, 4, 5. I'm not even sure what this one's called. 32 pages, all new art, number 23. Down Memory Lane, Ditko package. Ditko package, new reprints. Tisk. I've got them all scanned. By the time this podcast drops, they'll be on the eBays, and I'll have the cheapest price on round. So if you want them, come get some. Psst, that's Kray, what I see, by the way. I think you guys know that. I think you know that if you mention that you're listening to the podcast, that I'll give you some cool swag too. Swag is good, but you don't get the Thanos copter because that I play with.
And now we get to my favorite part of the show.
I'm calling from the inside of the Thanos copter, and sorry, I forgot we were still potting.
Not when I smack Joe upside the head for his helicopter joke. No. It's freaking and geeking. Joe, what you freaking on?
Excuse me while I turn the page. No, I got to go to a different page.
I thought you were going to whip this out.
No, that's you and your giant sized man thing.
Woo!
Remember how we said the weather changes?
Yes.
Court, tell them what we had the last 48 hours.
Enough rain that I was thinking of building an ark.
Oddly enough, it was enough rain to get us up to where we're supposed to be because we were in kind of a mini stretch without rain. So while the weathercasters are going, yeah, we need this rain, especially the farmers will want it. It came down anywhere from 2 to 4 inches. All I know is we had Lake Rider back in our basement. Now we planned for Lake Rider because I have a wet basement. Everything is up off the ground. The only thing that got hit was one empty cardboard box kind of was dipping just long enough for the water to hit it. And comic boxes, in case you didn't know, act like super soakers and and just sucked it up. Suck. So that was the only thing that got damaged. We had fans. We had the dehumidifier going. Fortunately, none of the gutters were overflowing because that would have meant we had to have gone up and during the middle of the rain, try to clean the gutters. There wasn't any thunder as far as I know. There might have been north of us. So things got a little wet, but no damage. Unlike past years where I've reported damage. So there will be no water sale this year on the eBay. Sorry, guys. That's just the way it goes. Cory, that's all I'm freaking on. How about you?
Let's see. Friday night, I did a shift at the group home, and it was a half awake, half sleep. Basically, there was only one client in the facility, but she wanders at night, so I needed to make sure that I was able to wake up if she were to, get up and start moving around to make sure that she stayed in bed. And there were a couple of times when I first got there where, I wasn't laying down, I was just kind of sitting up. And I was reading, and then I would hear her, and it would kind of jolt me, and I would go, okay, it's still dark out. It's still bedtime. But I guess I fell asleep with my glasses on and kind of slid down, and the next morning I'm reaching over to find my glasses, and I don't find them. And I'm looking here, and I'm looking there. And finally, I take the blanket, and I shake it out, and there's my glasses. And I had busted the arm off. And it wasn't where, you can unscrew everything. Nope, that arm the metal part was just snapped. So I was able to repair it for a couple of days with a mix of crazy glue and baking soda. Because if you use baking soda with your super glue, it makes it almost as hard as concrete. But, that only lasted a few days because glasses take a lot of punishment.
And so Cory's the Punisher.
So now I only have my glasses when I drive because that's legally the only time I need them. So when I watch TV, it's a little blurry, but I'm able to balance them so that as long as I'm driving and I don't don't spin my head too fast or look down, they stay where they're supposed to. Then one of my external hard drives was making all kinds of noise, which is never a good sign. So when I started up the computer, it's like, it's not starting. It's not starting. It's not starting. It's not starting. So I unplugged the external hard drive that was making the extra noise, and the computer started up. So I think that external hard drive is no longer with us. I also have become very, 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 very irritated with my desktop. So I had a whole bunch of Amazon points. And I said, you know what? I am tired of this. I am tired of everything being so slow. There we go. 16 gigabytes of RAM. That computer is mine. And with all the extra Amazon points I had, it basically came down to $100. So I'm getting myself a new desktop, getting myself new glasses. And neither one of those things are money that I wanted to spend, but I kind of had to. And then it was rain all weekend. I had the weekend off, and it rained the whole weekend. So I couldn't go out and read comics on the deck. I couldn't do any hiking. Nope. So I ordered pizza and made popcorn and watched some TV, but I slept a lot. You can tell that I have been pushing myself too hard because, oh my God, did I sleep a lot over the weekend. Comics are coming back last week. Marvel is waiting a week. So there will be no Marvel the first week. Marvel
Sure,
will
why
be
not?
out the second week. And I saw their list of how they'd rescheduled everything. And unlike DC, where they've had all their trade paperbacks and hardcovers coming in from their printers, so like I said at the beginning of the show, it's like, oh, my first shipment, 4 omnibuses from DC. Marvel, it looks like they're going to be spacing things out a lot more. And we still don't know all of the fall schedules because we may not even have a fall schedule. The CW has kind of announced that they are not starting their, quote, fall schedule till January because everything's delayed. They're actually picking up stuff from the DC service. They're going to be running that Swamp Thing series. They're picking up some other stuff. We don't know when any fall series will start, and there are a few where we don't even know if, like Stumptown, which is based on a Greg Rucka comic. We don't know if it's been reviewed or not because ABC is not going to announce their schedule yet. Also, a lot of the final episodes of the season they weren't able to film. So a lot of TV series where normally they build up to kind of a big reveal or a cliffhanger or something, it's more just kind of been, okay, we'll be back. So I wonder when this delay in stuff is going to actually hit Netflix, because Netflix is still dropping way too many series every week. Joe?
Yeah.
What are you geeking on?
I got lots of stuff today. Today I got a card from Veronica O'Connell. She's an artist up in Canada. Had a DC Supergirl sketch. Home of good quarters and back bacon, eh?
Native land.
She is on the eBay, so if you're looking for some art of your own, you can get a hold of her. Took a little bit of time to get here, and she's very good at communicating back and forth, because I sent her a note saying, hey, didn't get the card yet, because eBay says, oh, you'll get it at such and such a time. Well, they don't take in the fact that, mail is going at a snail's pace around here. One of our friends told me that some places they're delivering mail every other week or every other day to your house, the exception being if you got first class mail. So I contacted her and she said, yeah, what's happening is they're about 2-3 weeks later than they should be. Well, it showed up. And like most of the time I buy art on eBay, this is gorgeous. Oh. So look her up. She goes under Ripley Wolfie. RIPLEYWOLFIE.
Will Wolfie have anything to do with her?
If she's lucky, no. But yeah, so if you might see something you like, or just say, hey, these guys on this crazy podcast were talking about you and the Supergirl art card. Could you do one for me? So maybe she would. From Hero House Comics, I talked about how put my money where my mouth is. I got my order in from Mike, and like I said, probably the last essential I'll ever buy, the Punisher Essential number 2. I might go for 3 and 4. I think that just continues the Baron Klaus series. This one says it's got Punisher 1 through 20 and annual 10, and with a crossover to Daredevil 257. So, and then I also got 2 more of the Alan Moore saga, The Swamp Things, book 5 and 6. And I don't know if is 6 the last issue he did, number 64. Does that sound right, Cory?
Yeah.
Oh, so I got all of Alan Moore's run. And I almost guarantee you in the next previews will be an Alan Moore absolute, but that's a different subject. So that was kind of fun. We're getting ready to bid at work again. Don't know why, but I guess we are. The only real difference will be they'll have us working 3 days a week, which is no real difference from working 4 days a week, but whatever. And one of the guys who's ahead of us, I don't know if you've ever had this at your jobs, Cory, where you have a guy who is just older than dirt and probably should have retired like 20 years ago, but didn't. We had a guy like that. And, he came from checkpoints, so he kind of bumped everybody down in seniority. Just, oh, yeah, I'm going to retire this year. I'm going to retire this year. I'm going to retire this year. Finally, the scuttlebutt is, I'm going to retire this year, which would be nice because that means I bump up one in seniority. I won't get bumped to checkpoints. I won't get bumped to AM like I almost did last bid. The pandemic, of course, stopped that crazy scheme because no reason you can't train people and there's nobody flying. I still don't think anybody's going to be flying till later this year, but what do I know? I just work there. So that should be interesting. I think we're bidding end of March. It's supposed to be a phone bid, which will be interesting to see if they can pull it off. And then I suppose I'll bitch a few weeks about, I can't believe I got this shift, but whatever. That's just the way it goes. Other than that, things are going pretty good. eBay-wise, everybody's doing okay. Family-wise, haven't really gotten the thing everybody's avoiding. Got our taxes paid and everything. Not that I'm bitter about that. Cory, what you geeking on?
Let's see. Joe, do you miss sports?
No, because pro wrestling's 24/7, so I can watch it anytime I want.
How would you like to try a new sport?
A new sport?
Yes. Open up your Google. This is the interactive portion of the show.
Okay.
Open up the Google.
I got the Googles.
Type in JELLE.
Oh, one more time.
JELLE. Gel. Marble runs. That's right, competitive marble racing.
I've seen this before.
They've got a YouTube channel. They've got their website. They now have a sponsor. Their new season starts soon. I ran across this about a month ago and started watching it now and then. And then last week tonight with John Oliver, he talked about it as, this is the new sport. And basically today on my break and on my lunch, I've just been watching marble races. Because sports is sports. I haven't decided which team I'm going to cheer for yet. Also, because I had some time this weekend, I was able to read some stuff, and I got sucked into my big stack of back issue magazine, where it's like, okay, I'll read like the main article or an article I'm interested in, put it aside to read it another time. Well, this weekend was another time. Oh, I love back issues so much. It's very much Bronze and Modern Age. 70s and 80s comics, which, is my wheelhouse. I do not need the here is everything that happened in this series. My eyes kind of glaze over for those.
I kind of like that, but it depends on the series. 'Cause sometimes it makes me want to go find that series and reread it.
But what I do like is, like in the Firestorm issue, they interviewed Gary Conway about what he was going to do, what he did with the book. Then they interviewed John Ostrander. And it's fascinating to me when they get into why they made the story choices they did. What they had to do with editorial, how crossovers kind of either energize their storyline or cause problems with their story writing. That's the sort of thing I like. If you're going to do a review, and in a way, you're not bringing anything new to the party. When we do our series of review, we try to bring new stuff to the party. Have the creator involved in talking about what was going on behind the scenes. Why did Justice League Detroit come about? Why did they kill off the professor in Firestorm? What were the decisions behind that? That's the kind of stuff I like. Also, another YouTube series I think you should subscribe to. Mark Evanier is doing a series of interviews now. What it was, he was asked by the San Diego Comic-Con if he would test out doing panels online. And he started to do testing of it, but then he got to the point where he really enjoyed it. So now he's doing 2 or 3 a week. He did a 2-hour talk with Sergio Aragonés. He did almost a 2-hour talk with Paul Levitz. He's done 2 cartoon voices panels that go for over 2 hours. They're great panels, and one of the things that I remember about San Diego was his panels were only an hour long, so it almost felt like just as they were getting revved up and everybody was comfortable and they were telling stories, time to stop because the next panel's coming in. Well, with this, they don't have a time limit because it's however long people want to sit around and talk. So head on over. The 2 cartoon voices panels are fan-friggin-tastic. I know a lot of anime conventions have people who do anime voiceover. He interviews the people that, he's worked with, but also these are the workhorses. These are the people who, they do Nickelodeon shows and they do Disney shows and they, do tons and tons and tons of stuff. So they've got all sorts of stories about shoestring budgets, well-produced things, getting bumped by celebrities, having to come in if the previous person has passed away, and how to do that voice without imitating that person. Because if you just imitate them, you can't do the new stuff. So, and Sergio, of course, Sergio's stories, I could listen to Sergio talk all day. Sergio's one of these guys who's just had a fantastic life. And my favorite part of his series, Sergio Aragonés Funnies, were when he would draw a story of his life. So I will actually give a version of one of the stories he told. Joe, do you know how Sergio Aragonés got hired at Mad Magazine?
No.
Mad was kind of a closed shop. Yes, you could play stuff, but really every month William Gaines and the editor Al Feldstein, it's okay, we're going to have 5 pages of Dave Burke. We're going to have 5 pages of Mort Drucker. We're going to have 3 pages of George Woodbridge. We're going to have 3 pages of Jack Davis, sort of thing. So to break in was really, really hard. Sergio, who had come to New York to make his fame and fortune as a cartoonist, was going place to place to try and sell his cartoons. And most magazines weren't interested because they're pantomime cartoons. And in New York, it's no, we want literary cartoons. So finally, he goes up to Mad with his portfolio. And this is when he had just come to the U.S., so he didn't speak really good English. So he was asking if there were certain artists there, and one of the artists was Phobius. I think that's how you pronounce his name. The guy who drew Spy vs. Spy. And he was a recent immigrant from Cuba. So he, of course, spoke very little English himself and was still learning it. That's why Spy vs. Spy was a silent comic strip. But he was up at the studio. Sergio asked to speak to him, and he came out, and Sergio spoke Spanish to him. And Phobius, who hadn't heard a lot of people speaking Spanish in the office, was like, "Oh, my brother from Mexico. It's so good to see you." And the people in the Mad offices thought that Sergio was Phobius's brother, so of course they bought some of his stuff, and then they bought more of his stuff, and they, Al Feldstein would suggest something. Sergio would go back to his hotel or, wherever he was staying and draw a bunch and bring it back the next day. And he drew so fast that they said, "We have enough. We have enough now." And if you read Mad in the early, they would have jokes. They would have written jokes along the sides. And he suggested, "Hey, why don't I draw cartoons that you could put along the sides too?" So that's how he was able to get more work, because he was so fast. He needed more work, and he was basically looking for a way to crowbar more stuff into Mad. He tells all sorts of stories about working as a waiter, working as a garbage man. Sergio, we are a national treasure, but Sergio is an international treasure. So go watch those. They're especially the Sergio one. The Sergio one's just phenomenal, and I'd be happy if he interviews Sergio every day. Believe it or not, kids, you've listened to us blather on about funny books and funny book shops for almost 2 hours.
You're welcome.
And as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better, and the comic that you like the most. Joe?
I accidentally swallowed a bunch of Scrabble tiles. My next trip to the bathroom could spell disaster. Disaster, Cory! Could spell disaster! I still got it. Hit my music.